Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into something that sounds like a crazy movie plot, Operation Northwoods.
And the crazy thing is, this isn't some conspiracy theory. It was a real plan from 1962, and it came from the top U.S. military leaders. They were actually thinking about staging attacks, fake attacks, on Americans.
Wow, yeah. That's hard to believe. People who are supposed to protect us would even think about something like that. So how did this even come about? Take us back to 1962. What was going on?
Okay, so picture this. The world is like a powder keg, ready to blow. It's the Cold War, and everyone's terrified of communism spreading. And for the U.S., having communist Cuba right there, just 90 miles from Florida, it was a huge nightmare.
Right, and then there's a Bay of Pigs invasion in '61 that just made things worse.
Exactly. The Bay of Pigs was a total disaster for the Kennedy administration. It made them look weak, and the pressure was on to get rid of Castro, like, now.
So that's where Operation Northwoods comes in. This plan was presented to Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, in March of '62. What exactly were they suggesting?
The plan had all these wild, shocking schemes, and they were all designed to make people angry, so angry they would want to invade Cuba.
Okay, give us the details. What were these schemes?
Well, one idea was to actually bomb U.S. cities. They were talking about, like, Miami, and then they'd plant evidence to make it look like Cuban terrorists did it.
Wait, they were going to kill their own people to start a war? That's insane.
It's scary, right? And that's just one of the ideas they had. They also talked about sinking an American Navy ship in Guantanamo Bay and saying Cuba attacked us.
Jesus, sounds like something out of a spy movie. Was there anything else in this plan?
Maybe the craziest idea was to stage a fake hijacking. They were going to switch a real U.S. plane with a drone, make it look full of passengers, and then shoot it down. They even talked about making a list of fake dead passengers to make it look real.
I mean, this is unbelievable. How did they think they could get away with this? Did they really think no one would find out?
Well, remember, things were different back then. No internet, no 24/7 news. People got their news from, like, newspapers and the government. And the people behind this plan, they thought they could control what people heard and saw.
So they thought people would just believe whatever the government told them.
Yeah.
What about all the people involved in these fake attacks? The witnesses, the families. Someone would have talked.
That's the really messed up part of all this. It shows how little they cared about people. They were willing to lie and use people's feelings to get what they wanted.
It makes you wonder what they thought was okay and not okay. But before we get into that, what happened to Operation Northwoods? Did they actually do any of this?
No, thankfully not. President Kennedy said no to the whole thing. He was apparently shocked by it.
I bet. But why would he go against his top military people, especially when things were so tense with the Cold War? Why would he say no?
That's a good question. And there's a bunch of theories about why Kennedy rejected Operation Northwoods. Some people say he just wasn't willing to kill Americans in some crazy scheme like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kennedy was all about peace, not war. Were there any other reasons?
Well, some people say he was worried about what would happen if the truth got out. Think about it. What if people found out America was attacking itself to start a war?
Yeah, that would have been a huge disaster for America. People wouldn't trust us anymore.
You got it. And it might have even made the Cold War worse, maybe even started a bigger war. But there's one more theory we need to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
Some people say Kennedy didn't trust the military. He thought they were trying to take over, make all the decisions. Maybe he saw Operation Northwoods as a way for them to control him.
So maybe there was some power struggle going on, like the White House versus the Pentagon. That's getting interesting.
It is. It makes you think about what was happening behind closed doors between Kennedy and the military. Were they fighting? Were they threatening each other? It had to be super tense back then.
I bet. I mean, this whole plan was so crazy. It's kind of scary that people in power could even think about doing something like this.
Yeah, for sure. It makes you realize that even in a democracy, people can abuse their power. Makes you wonder what other stuff they were cooking up back then.
That's a really disturbing thought. So how did this plan, which was supposed to be top secret, how did it finally come out?
It was classified for, over 30 years. It wasn't until 1997 that these documents were declassified and released. It was all part of the investigation into JFK's assassination, actually.
Wow. So this was a secret for a long time, hidden away somewhere. I bet people were shocked when it finally came out.
You bet. It was a huge deal. It made people question everything about the government, and it made a lot of people start digging into what really happened during the Cold War.
Makes you think about what other secrets are still out there, waiting to be discovered. But we'll get to those questions later. Right now, let's look closer at these crazy schemes in Operation Northwoods. Like, how are they designed to make people believe what they wanted them to believe?
Yeah, that's super important to understand. We got to figure out how they were going to trick people and use their emotions to start a war.
Exactly. So when we come back, we'll break down these schemes step by step. We'll look at how they were supposed to make people scared and angry enough to support an invasion of Cuba. Stick around.
Welcome back. Before we get into the, nuts and bolts of these crazy plans, let's talk about this whole idea of a casus belli. That's like a fancy way of saying a reason to go to war. It's been a thing throughout history.
Yeah, it's interesting how events are often, spun to make people feel a certain way, especially to make them support a war.
Exactly. And Operation Northwoods is like a textbook example of that. It shows how governments can try to trick people, even if it means doing some really messed up stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of scary to think about how easily we can be manipulated, especially when we trust the people in charge, like when it's our own government telling us something.
That's why it's so important to, think for yourself. Don't just believe everything you hear, especially when things are chaotic or when people are really scared.
Totally. So let's get back to Operation Northwoods. You were talking about bombing U.S. cities and making it look like Cuba did it. How did they think they could actually do that?
Well, they had a bunch of different ideas, and they were all pretty disturbing. One plan was to set off bombs in places like Miami, and then they would leave fake clues to make it look like Cuban agents were behind it.
I mean, it's just insane that they were willing to hurt their own people like that. What were they hoping to achieve with all this?
They thought that if they could scare people enough, they could get them to demand an attack on Cuba. The idea was to make America look like the victim so they could say, look, Cuba attacked us, we have to fight back.
So basically, they were trying to play on people's fear and anger to get what they wanted.
Yeah, pretty much. And they weren't just trying to convince the American people, they also wanted to make other countries think Cuba was the bad guy.
It's like they were playing some kind of twisted mind game with the whole world, and the fact that they were willing to sacrifice innocent lives to do it is just horrifying.
Absolutely. And that same disregard for human life is there in the other parts of Operation Northwoods, too. Remember the plan to sink an American Navy ship?
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Tell me more about how they were going to do that.
Well, one idea was to make an American ship look like a Cuban ship and then sink it themselves. They even talked about having a fake funeral for the dead sailors with their families and everything, just to make it more convincing.
It's just, I don't even know what to say. The lengths they were willing to go to, the planning involved, it's impressive in a really messed up way.
It's a perfect example of how cynical they were. They were willing to exploit people's grief and sadness just to get their way.
It makes you wonder what kind of people could even come up with these ideas. Did they actually believe it was the right thing to do? Or did they just get so caught up in the whole Cold War thing that they lost sight of what was right and wrong?
That's a tough question. I think it was probably a combination of things, They were definitely caught up in the Cold War mindset, but I also think they believed they were doing what was best for America, no matter the cost.
Yeah. It's scary how easy it is for people to get swept up in that kind of thinking, especially when they're afraid. It shows how important it is to question things, even when the people in charge seem to know what they're doing.
You got it. It's crucial to think for yourself and not just follow the crowd. So, speaking of crazy ideas, let's talk about the hijacking plan. The one where they were going to fake a whole plane being shot down. How are they going to make that happen?
Yeah, that one was just wild. Fill us in on the details.
So the plan was to take a real passenger plane and swap it out with a drone, make it look like it was full of people, and then blow it out of the sky. They were even thinking about using a plane that had been used for refugees before to make the connection to Cuba even stronger.
That's just awful. Imagine how terrifying that would have been for everyone. The families, the whole country.
That's exactly the reaction they wanted. They figured that kind of tragedy would unite the country against Cuba. It would be the perfect excuse to invade.
Ugh, it's so messed up. They were willing to create a disaster, to kill innocent people, just to get what they wanted. It makes you wonder, how do we stop people in power from doing stuff like this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Operation Northwoods shows just how dark things can get, even in a democracy. It shows how important it is to be aware of what's going on and to hold our leaders accountable.
It's a reminder that we can't just sit back and trust that everything will be okay. We have to be involved, we have to speak up, and we have to demand better from our leaders. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about Operation Northwoods, and, well, it's pretty scary stuff. But Kennedy said no to it, right? He went against his top military guys. Why would he do that?
Yeah, it was a huge decision. It really shows what kind of leader Kennedy was. Think about it. The Cold War was terrifying everyone. America looked bad after the Bay of Pigs thing, and he had people in his own government pushing for war.
But he still said no. What was he thinking? What made him decide against it?
Well, maybe he just couldn't stomach the idea of, like, attacking innocent Americans, even if he thought it would help in the long run. I mean, he knew war was a horrible thing. Maybe that's why he said no.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about war, but it's another to actually see it. It must weigh heavily on him.
Totally. And don't forget, if the truth about Operation Northwoods ever got out, it would have been a disaster. Can you imagine people finding out America was faking attacks to start a war?
America's reputation would be in ruins. It could even made the Cold War a lot worse.
Exactly. And there's another thing to think about. Operation Northwoods was like the military trying to take charge. Maybe Kennedy saw that. Maybe he thought they were overstepping their boundaries.
So maybe it was about more than just the plan itself. Maybe it was about who was really in control, Kennedy or the military.
Right. And by rejecting Northwoods, he was sending a message. He was saying, I'm the one who makes the decisions.
It shows he wasn't afraid to stand up to the military, even when everyone was freaking out about the Cold War.
It was a gutsy move, no doubt. And I think it shows that Kennedy was thinking about the big picture. He wasn't just reacting to the pressure. He was trying to do what was best for America in the long run.
It's a good reminder that real leaders have to make tough choices, even when it's unpopular. So, thinking about Operation Northwoods, even though it never happened, what do you think is the most important thing for people to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that even in a democracy, bad things can happen. People in power can try to deceive us, they can manipulate us, and they can abuse their power. It's happened before, and it can happen again.
So what can we do about it? How can we protect ourselves from this kind of thing?
Don't be passive. Be skeptical. Be curious. Don't just believe everything you hear. Check your sources. Look at things from different angles. And most importantly, ask questions. Even if it's the government or some big important person, it's our right and it's our duty to hold them accountable.
Those are some great points. And that's what the deep dive is all about. We want to give you the information you need to think for yourself, to make your own decisions, and to be a more informed citizen.
Because knowledge is power, right? And the more we know about how the world really works, the better equipped we are to make it a better place.
You've said it better myself. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into Operation Northwoods. It's a dark chapter in American history, but it's one we can all learn from. So stay curious, keep asking questions, and never stop learning. Until next time, this is The Deep Dive. Signing off. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel.